Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and welcome to Politics 2100 here on YouTube. So, this episode I'm calling The Poverty of Theory, parentheses, also keeps the left rudderless, comma, disorganized, comma, weak. So, this title is attempting to simplify more complicated message that I'm putting together in this particular vlog or contribution here. So it's an observation about how the left in the United States and all around the world really is no longer so attached to any particular theory, and represents a diversity of approaches to politics and to organizing, both electoral politics and also just labor organizing, community organizing, all the areas where a left can contribute to social progress, human prosperity, human flourishing. And so this is, there's a number of factors involved here, and this is not a call to for people to become immersed in existing theory, not to ignore it either, but also to create new theory. I'm trying to do that here to some degree on my vlog, and then I will also be doing that in written form periodically. But anyway, so there's been a failure since really for a long time. You can trace it back to the failure of communism / Marxism to really provide a vision for the future. I mean, there have been successive attempts to revive Marxism. It's been revised a number of times, but there's been a series of letdowns of theory that have created problems in the world due to bad theory, and also it's not the existing left theory hasn't been innocent and has not. It can be held accountable for some disastrous, horrific failures in the former Soviet Union and also in communist China, especially under Mao, but also in successive governments in China as well, post Mao. But anyway, but also in its social democratic forms, in the forms of, or democratic socialist forms in various, democracies. They're not the same kind of catastrophic failures and catastrophic cult-like, genocides of various kinds, or genocidal level of activity that have led to various uses of state violence to create all kinds of human suffering beyond the existing suffering that was being attempted to be remedied by left theory. So anyway, the problem is, at root, there are some basic issues with Marxist theory, which, even though most people now don't adhere to Marxism as a philosophy, it pervades certain, or there are assumptions from Marxism that pervade certain left approaches to social problems that need to be revised. Okay, it's become part of a sort of, there's a kind of a vague common sense that can be individually edited, eclectically edited by various people to form their own version of whatever their politics is that is vaguely left. And in turn, recently, I've seen people who are vaguely left help support the right wing, or forms of the right wing, like Vladimir Putin, that appear to be quote unquote anti-imperialist, but are people who are actually working against what I would consider to be human progress and also human freedom in the guise of resisting U.S. imperialism or the U.S. military machine, which I'm also opposed to, but and I think is a major problem in the world. But there are a multiplicity of problems in the world, some of which have been generated by left theory or by the wisps of left theory and left ideas that are, for instance, represented by a neo-fascist dictator like Putin. So you've already seen in the context of Politics 2100 that I attempt to use some of the sort of traditional words like fascist, neo-fascist, or social democracy, some words from existing political science, you could say, academic words or words that are theoretically accurate, I would say, or semi-accurate or need to be updated, but still they're words from our historical understanding of politics and of economics that seem to fit the current situation. But anyway, but overall, we have here in contemporary left, the left environment currently, we have basically people who are not addressing to me what are the major existential threats to society on the left. They are focused on, often some of them are antiquarians, it seems. For instance, Jacobin seems to me to be preoccupied with somewhat antiquated ideas. They seem vaguely quaint in my view in terms of their sort of reviving certain traditions of the left and using them as sort of guideposts for future action. And there's that could be potentially valuable, a valuable process, but it seems mostly backwards facing, in my opinion, and not facing forward to what are the crises in the current world. For me, the major crisis is the climate crisis, and any theory that is not addressing that directly head on is using an antiquated model that doesn't get us on the path to resolving that quickly, is not relevant and is not progressive and is not left in the current situation. So, and there are also there's also intersectional questions that left theory is not good at. It's not good at understanding, sexual or sex-based oppression or gender-based oppression, identity-based oppressions. It's not very good at that. There have been adaptations of that, of left theory to those questions, but they've sort of torn apart the tradition, the parts of left theory that really are still relevant: the economic theory, the class theory, the idea of a universalism. That, in other words, one of the issues that much of the theory that's about intersectionality, or is about what sometimes is called woke, and theory, or I've called it identitarian theory sometimes, that it assumes or it leaves behind or a universalistic approach that all humanity are our fellow humans, our people. We're all part of the same species. We're part of the same group of people who need to communicate with each other to try to create a civilization, a global civilization, but also on each national culture, but through those cultures to create a global or internationalist consciousness that helps us navigate the major challenges of the 21st century, and keeps us communicating with each other and recognizing each other and empathizing with each other at many different identities and many different social, economic levels, and trying to figure out where the key dynamics are that we need to change in our society, need to the conflicts we need to resolve or need to sharpen, even to get to where we need to go. So this sounds like there's some vagueness in what I'm talking about. There's some generality, and I can get into more specifics in future videos, but I'm opening up the idea of theory, and this is in contrast to the right wing. So the right wing actually has, even though we are criticizing the right wing often as having no agenda, and they don't have a policy agenda, while the left in the United States has a basic policy agenda. Okay, it's not a very radical agenda, or it could be a radical agenda if it were done in full and done completely, and not just in small drips and drabs. But the theory behind that agenda is opaque to people, so it's hard to talk about it as a unified agenda. But still, if let's say the very progressive left were in power, which it's not, and Joe Biden is not a progressive, the Democratic Party structure is not a progressive, there appear to be some people in Congress and at some state and local levels of government who are true progressives and are trying to get quite substantial change done through legislation and through appointments to various offices and so forth and so on. But that's still a small and not very powerful minority in the Democratic Party, and it's mostly the Democratic Party, or just outside in the periphery of the Democratic Party. But anyway, there's not a theory. It's hard to discuss on what the theory is behind it. I call it social democracy. I call it, or I would say it's a climate-focused social democratic vision that is eminent in those, that is suggested by that policy program, but it's not discussed as let's all be social democrats and do these things to create a society that looks like X, Y, and Z, and create the general view of what that society looks like, the feeling of that society, to be passionate about that view, to create passions in people for creating that. That is, it's more saying, well, I'm for Medicare for all, and I'm against people. So Medicare for all has some very profound, would mean some very profound changes in our society, but we haven't developed a theory about. I've been starting here to try to, when talking about labor discipline, about how our current public policy is based on disciplining labor through creating scarcity, through austerity, through creating insecurity in people's lives, and so forth and so on. And there are other people who, I'm not alone in talking about these things, but it's not part of a general theory of society and of a general critique. Capitalism, talk about it as capitalism is, sort of. There are different ways to talk about capitalism, but it's also a particular type of capitalism we're talking about, even because there are other societies where this kind of labor discipline is not nearly as strong in that particular way. And those are social democracies, and we seem to be wanting to go at least to that stage of society, if maybe go beyond it to some other mode of production that is not capitalist. But anyway, we don't have the theory to talk about that is emotive, that talks in terms where people can describe these things, and where where you can bring people's lived experience, other than obviously the failures of our medical system, our medical payment system, so forth and so on, in just talking about Medicare for all. Anyway, by contrast, okay, the right wing, in its negativity, in its destructiveness, has an intuitive theory. It's not a policy program. It's an anti-policy program. They don't want to better people's lives through government, but that is part of the theory. Or they want to. So there's two parts to the right wing, and then they've been transitioning from one program to the other. It's not a program, one theory to the other. So the media and the business press and economics, mainstream economics, all have created a background where the right-wing vision is much more easy to form, easy to call out, easy to create a common sense where people live in it, and the media constantly, and experts and pundits in the media and so forth and so on, and talk show hosts and so forth and so on the right wing and even in the center, create this common sense that reinforces one of these two right-wing narratives. So the one that has dominated the last 35 years has been, or at least up to, let's say, 2016, 2015, was austerian neoliberalism combined with belief in markets as being this great solution, and that we want the freedom to buy and sell, and anything that suggests that the government could do anything to support and help people and create a more substantial safety net, or a more, was considered to be anathema. And this is all about, it's basically the libertarian ideal. Okay, so, but we were at a point of transition since 2015, since Donald Trump and Trumpism, which built on that to some degree, but created this, or made the subtext of that quote unquote libertarian program, or laissez-faire, or trickle-down program, austerian program, brought the subtext up of race, and of and Donald Trump introduced that we want to institute, we the right wing want to institute a protection for the right kind of people, okay, and their my social security and not their social security. So basically, the attack on the social welfare state, starting with the Southern strategy and so forth and so on, and continuing on in the Republican political project of the last 50 years, was based on the idea that the wrong kind of people were getting help from the government, and that the right kind of people were being left behind, were being ignored. And so the welfare queen, the so forth and so on, that the images of basically of black people, or of Mexican people, Latina people, Latine people being given help from the government, new immigrants being given help from the government, and this created this sense of of ressentiment upon which the right wing has built its political program. So now the explicit, the subtext of that saying, well, government is bad altogether, is now being transformed into saying, well, government for us is good and government for them is bad. And so creating a two-class system, or more than two-class system, but certainly where the deserving people get what they get protection from government, but then the bad people, the people get excluded from government, and get even not only get excluded, but are actively suppressed from government, or their active aggression by either paramilitary or thuggish, whatever activists on the right, basically beat on and exclude marginal people like trans people or parents who are trying to protect their trans kids and trying to create a vision of the sort of punishing the sadist, the sadistic, punisher figure of, for instance, a Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis now. Being active cruelty as being the selling point to this constituency, which is not universal, but they're organized constituency that has a sense of what I'm calling a theory or intuitive theory. It's not a written theory, but there are people now who are writing theory, the national conservative, neo-Nazi, neo-fascist theories that are saying, we are here for the right kind of people, the white people, and not the colored people, nor not the non-white people of color. The woke agenda. We're against the woke agenda. We're for the old America that was good, and that's what we're preserving, and that's what we're going to protect with government or with help of government, active government measures. Often the avoiding, if all possible, again, and they're with an alliance, they are trying not to divorce themselves entirely from the Austerian program of the previous politics of the right. They're not trying to say that they're totally against that, but they would prefer to deliver this protection via these sort of dramatic police actions, against the supposed bad people, instead of instituting, for instance, a stronger Social Security, reinforcing Medicare, the kind of program, funding the VA, or more in a more secure manner, protecting, the 9/11, the health people who suffered from the 9/11 attacks and so forth and so on, and so they're against a positive program of doing those kind of things. They're trying to be both the Austerians and this sort of dramatic Punch and Judy punishers and that's the way that they are trying to attempt to be protectors of their constituency. So anyway, but that's not really a theory. That's not a well thought out theory. There are people who are theorizing that on the right wing, and it's not. But that theory is not yet really, there are some young people who are maybe becoming passionate based on those retrograde theories, and they are becoming shock troops for that reactionary program. But we don't, anyway, to go back to they've had the wind at their backs because media and has been much more supportive of other than the extreme, the embarrassment, so to speak, of Donald Trump, who and they're trying now to exclude. They're trying to make Donald Trump the I'm not sorry that he's being made, but they're trying to make him the scapegoat for this more general Republican, more general right wing, more general neo-fascist or neo-Confederate trend and also view, but they're trying to make him the fall guy for this program that he had a role in popularizing and he is and was a master of. He is not so much a master of it anymore, but he has been a master of massaging the streams of resentment and hate and creating this emotional, intuitive theory, which was very much attached to him and his personality. And so this also gets to the sort of the other benefit of theory, of having an actual theory on the left, among other things, is that because also in the moderate left, and also even on the in the sort of the social democratic left, it's not in a far left, but it's a sort of a middle left. You could call it democratic socialist. It's not really far to the left in the area of socialism or Marxism or whatever. But anyway, that there is a tendency to without theory to become attached to individuals, and they're not only on the right, not only whoever Trump, but also on the left, for people to associate their politics as being, well, I'm a Bernie person, or I'm a AOC person, or I'm a Cory Bush person, or whatever. Or I'm a squad person, who are a series of personalities, or with different politics, slightly different politics, and they're close to each other in Sanders and the squad and so forth and so on. But anyway, and now the sort of expanded squad that we're going to be getting in January. But there is a danger in having, without a theory, and in some sense we're seeing on the right their intuitive theory sort of actually helping them get over Trump. Okay, Trump is now failing them in some ways or another. He's in his super narcissism, in his pathological narcissism, in his mental illness. He is spinning out of control even for the right wing, which already bases its politics in a way on a certain kind of, I would say, mental illness, a certain type of mass psychosis, even whipping people up into a frenzy about many insignificant or distorted problems, and creating distorted solutions for problems to basically mislead people into a kind of a world, a malignant fantasy world where complete with delusions and hallucinations even of what's going wrong with our society. Though not totally, there are some real issues that the right wing does point out, or there are some real feelings but they're creating false solutions to some real problems or that exist. But the left doesn't, but anyway, what I'm saying is they're transitioning from Trump to for instance, Ron DeSantis. There's the sense that even though DeSantis may not be the vehicle that they want, and the charisma is important for their politics as well. But anyway, on the left, we don't really have a theory that helps us understand where a Bernie or AOC or Cory Bush or whomever, or a media figure, or a YouTube person like myself, where we fall down, where we are. It's all a matter of just sort of saying, well, I don't like what they said. They said a bad thing, so they're no longer part of the select people that I believe. They're no longer respectable. So anyway, so we don't have a theory where people can analyze what people are doing. This is even though there is the other side of having a theory that you're always saying this is correct and incorrect. So there was a time, there were a lot of people who remember the 1970s and or late 60s, 1970s, where people had a turn toward Marxism and or certain parts of the New Left, and that some of them still exist, and some of them are use terms like correct and incorrect, or have a certain kind of dogmatic, theoretical, intellectual cognitive framework. But the total lack of a cognitive framework is also, or a very, very loose one that isn't attached to a dynamic theory of change, is also a problem. So the problem with the theories of the 60s and 70s where they were echoes of the wrong theory in the first place. So even though, what I might be saying may sound to those people who are the critics of that super dogma, which we don't see very much anymore, of the 1970s and to some degree the 80s, but 60s, 70s, from the echoes of the anti-Vietnam, anti-war movement from Vietnam, and where, among other things, Bernie Sanders originally, had his start, and so forth and so on. And I was also, radicalized or politicized in some of the echoes of that time. And I encountered many people who had that kind of dogmatic, mostly associated with Marxism-Leninism or various, spin-offs from that. But anyway, having a better theory, a better understanding to be able to use it self-consciously, to say my theory is a series of really hypotheses about the world, to be more quote unquote scientific rather than to declare it as theory, to say, I have a bunch of hypotheses based on my assumptions about society and where we should go. All of that, I think, could help structure, if we do it, if it's done right, if it's done in a way that actually enlightens, that's actually opens us up to reality, not doesn't close us up to reality, opens us up to the reality of the world, opens us up to activism, to becoming active and trying to act in to save our species, essentially, at this point in time, and to save civilization, to save to fight against barbarism. All these things, I think, having some theory, some open theory, some set of hypotheses that we are happy to either to get rid of or to dismiss if they are wrong, but still be able to generate those hypotheses from some background, some of a theory, is something that is potentially helpful. And anyway, I will hope at least to point out where theory might be helpful, and also point out some places where in subsequent episodes where we can actually make some progress by critiquing fundamentally Marxist theory, among other things, and where that's misleading us, and maybe just through a good critique, we will just come to some open understanding that doesn't require someone to read a long treatise on anything to understand it. But anyway, more to come on that, and I have some very specific ideas for some future episodes to talk about that. But anyway, so I've been going on quite a long time, and I hope this has been helpful to some people. And if you like the video, please like it. And I will be talking about more specific issues in other episodes. I'm not devoting Politics 2100 only to this question of whether we need a theory and what kind of theory we should have. But I will be occasionally introducing it again in this at Politics 2100. So please subscribe if you're interested in any of these issues, the topical or the more theoretical questions, or however you want to call them. And hope to see you in the next video. So thanks.